I did have a PhD in biomedical engineering, and then from graduate school I actually went to a consulting firm, which provided a lot of kind of the fundamentals in terms of understanding the client's needs in the pharmaceutical industry. So the value proposition is the information that we're providing. So we're providing a data set that the pharma company is generally unaware of. It's actually publicly available data, as it happens, but we provide the expertise to help them navigate that data set. As I mentioned, they're generally unfamiliar with the data. It's fairly new data, and I think most pharma companies don't have an internal resource to help them navigate that data set. So my team provides the expertise. They do kind of the back-end data work also, so providing some capabilities that pharma typically does not have. We work with a lot of commercial teams, business teams that in general do not really have kind of the technical capabilities for pulling very large data sets and navigating through those data sets. The innovation and the novelty of it is in the uniqueness of putting a particular data set in the right context. People generally not considered it in that context. The data that we work with, it's primarily to kind of provide transparency to the business practices of pharma companies, but we've actually kind of turned that around and used it to provide insight into commercial strategies of pharmaceutical companies. So really the innovative part is kind of taking a data set that's already known, but retooling it, reformatting it, reusing it in a novel way. So I think that we're somewhat ahead of the curve, and we identified this data set early. The life science industry doesn't exist without the business side. It's essential to kind of the health of the business, and a lot of that work ends up driving the R&D engine. So I kind of balance it out that way, but definitely I think a lot about, like, am I actually doing enough to kind of meet societal needs? And so that's something that I think you definitely have to be kind of honest with yourself if you're thinking about getting into the business side of life science. Do you feel that you're doing enough good? So, you know, for me to be in a consulting firm was a learning experience. You get exposed to a lot of, you know, what are the questions that pharma companies are trying to solve. And a very common theme if you're in the life science consulting industry is that pharma companies want to know who, like, the most important physicians in the country are for any specific disease area. And that's a very common project that you do at a consulting firm, is like kind of mapping out the KOLs, as they call them, the key opinion leaders. So I knew that that was a common question that pharma companies have, and there was a lot of companies that exist to answer that question. A lot of different consulting firms helping pharma companies kind of map out those KOLs. So I knew that the need was there, and we, me and a partner, basically identified a novel way to do that. So new data sets. There's a lot of publicly available information in the world, and by kind of pulling different data sets and using them in different ways, you can help pharma companies map out who those physicians are. We sell projects as billable hours, helping clients solve a defined problem, and when we scope it out, it's fairly defined project scope. We try to kind of productize our offering, but it still is very much kind of a service industry that we're participating in. No major investment of capital other than just an investment of time. And the investment of time allowed us to put together kind of a pitch deck and reach out to people that we already knew in the industry, and it got us to the point where we were able to sell a project pretty early, and from there it's all been basically pretty much profitable from the beginning, because there was no long-term investment in product development, and there was not a lot of capital required to get us off the ground. Any sort of research that you do as a grad student is pretty challenging without some sort of mentorship or outside influence. I think that most grad students don't have the resources, they don't know where to go to find the information that they need to figure out how to assemble a team or begin actually building a product. So I would think that some outside resources are important. I think like having that dynamic of like tech expertise versus business expertise is very important. If you're setting up like an LLC, early on you're probably going to need an operating agreement, and to really think about roles and responsibilities of each of your team members is very, very important. We'd really formalized what our product was and what our offering was. We were doing pitch meetings to potential clients, so trying to figure out exactly what's going to sell and why it's going to sell before you invest a ton of time into developing the product is, I think, very important. A lot of people fall into the trap of like spending 6 months or a year developing a product and trying to figure out exactly how everything's supposed to look and what all the details are without knowing if there's going to be a customer for it. Our approach was very much to find a customer first.